I hope you are doing well. America is certainly at a crossroads, and it's exciting to know that I believe we are going to choose the moral high ground. And thank you so much for joining us again today for Go Live for Equity. My name is Margaret Mitchell, and I'm President and CEO for YWCA Greater Cleveland. And it is a delight and a pleasure to be able to have Dawn Harris with us today. She is Managing Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Nascar. And we got connected through the 21-day challenge because a friend of hers in Cleveland sent her the challenge at Nascar, and here we are. So welcome, Dawn.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be back home.
Dawn, you are a Clevelander.
Right.
You graduated from Ohio State and then went points north to start your career.
That's
which
right.
Included some time with YWCA before Pillsbury and other large corporate organizations.
Yes. The video actually brought back a lot of memories about my work at the YWCA of Minneapolis in terms of the focus on women's equity and racism. So it's great to be reconnected with the YWCA of Cleveland.
Well, we are delighted to have you. And of course, NASCAR has had an amazing week.
Yes.
At the beginning of the week, we learned that Michael Jordan, even if you are not a uber sports fan like I am, you know the name Michael Jordan, Air Jordan, and he has stepped in to become a majority owner. And what an amazing week.
Yes, very exciting times for us, and just happy to have Michael Jordan be part of the momentum that we have been on a journey on in terms of just broadening our outreach and our engagement. He's a true competitor. He's ready to get going with Bubba Wallace, our currently African-American driver in our Cup Series. So we're all excited and raring to go, and just so happy to have him be part of the sport.
Michael Jordan certainly is a red carpet to NASCAR that people of all different backgrounds will flock into the sport. But this red carpet is something you have been working on for quite some time. Tell us when you first got to NASCAR and sort of the early days of beginning to build this equity and inclusion work there.
Sure. So I have been with NASCAR a little over 13 years now. It's amazing that it's been that amount of time. A lot of the work that I've been doing has been focused on the on-track development, such as the product of Bubba Wallace. A lot of our research indicates that people, tend to follow someone that they have some sort of affinity to. So be it hometown, be it race, gender, ethnicity. So we have an initiative called Drive for Diversity that really helps to identify up and coming diverse and female talent to get them behind the wheel and what we call over the wall as a pit crew member. So I've been very active in the NASCAR Drive for Diversity program since its inception. We have also more recently expanded our youth component of that program. So typically it's not a problem to get the kids to want to race in the cars. It's the parents to overcome their fear of their kid being in the car. But that's something else that I've been working on since I've been there. I would say the other big plank, if you will, has been the off-track engagement in terms of just introducing people to the sport. bringing diverse fans out, well, what we hope to be fans after they come, just to experience what that day is like. And just the sensory explosion, as we say, the sounds, the sights, the smells. I think a lot of people don't really know how fun and exciting the sport can be until you actually come to a race. Most of the time when you come, you're hooked. What we also tell people is to pick a driver, pick someone that you can follow, because that then adds texture and component to your race day, and also after you leave. Those are two examples of the work that I've been doing since I've been there, and just really excited to really help set that platform and just to see more growth over the last 13 years since I've been there.
The Drive for Diversity has been an amazing initiative. I think I really became aware of it maybe in 2016. Of course, Brianna, I'm
Brianna Daniels.
Daniels
Yes.
sort of comes out of that initiative as a member of the pit crew, just an amazing young African-American woman who's sort of we've been able to see the results of Drive for Diversity. But my question is, I become aware of it in 2016, but I'm wondering, how long did it take in terms of from conception to having it on paper to actually standing it up and building a pipeline?
Mm-hmm. I would say that, so the pit crew program in particular has been in place probably about 15 years, actually. It has grown over time. And just for people who may not be familiar, the pit crew members are the individuals who jump the wall during a race, who change the tires, add the fuel, who are critical to maintaining the speed that the driver is on to win the race. That particular position requires a lot of athleticism. You have to have great footwork, great agility, be able to lift heavy items very quickly. At our cup level, a pit stop can take 12 seconds, 11, 12 seconds. Those are like the top speeds. So what we did within Drive for Diversity for the pit crew program was really start to hone in on collegiate athletes. All of them are not, it's not exclusively college athletes, but a lot of them are college athletes. And we started going to various HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, and hosting a pit crew day. Brianna Daniels, for example, was a student at Norfolk State in Virginia. She played basketball, had no interest or knowledge of NASCAR at all, and basically went to the pit crew event at the encouragement of someone on the staff of the athletic department. Our team was so impressed with her speed and invited her to try out for our annual pit crew combine. But it has been a process in terms of just widening the exposure, the engagement, and really candidly overcoming potential negative stereotypes that people may have about NASCAR or the sport, or feeling that they're going to be welcome in the sport. We currently, on any given weekend now, have over 50 diverse pit crew members who are pitting at our national series level. So we have seen that particular program from a concept really grow to something that's sustainable. And these pit crew members are now pitting across all of our series at the premier teams, including, Brianna Daniels as a great example of someone who didn't really have any knowledge of NASCAR, embraced the experience, embraced the journey, and now she is probably one of the best well-known pit crew members in our industry. We actually have an annual diversity awards event that will be held in early October. And she is actually going to be our awardee this year, just to as a recognition of her ability on the track and all the work that she's done to really create more awareness about NASCAR and the opportunities for women and for people of color.
It's amazing. I love, really hearing how 15 years and You really see the pipeline and the growth happening slowly over time. And
Hmm.
of course, with Michael Jordan being a majority owner, I think we'll probably see a level of acceleration
Oh,
with
yes.
that initiative happening. But Michael Jordan isn't the only owner, African-American owner. There is a minority owner in NASCAR that has a Cleveland connection as
Right.
well.
Right. So Brad Daugherty, for those of you who are longtime Clevelanders, he played for the Cleveland Cavs. Brad Daugherty and Michael Jordan both grew up in North Carolina, and Brad Daugherty went to races as a young child. He actually followed Richard Petty when he was a driver and assumed that number 43 when he played professional sports. He currently, as you say, owns part of a team, and very recently also sits in the broadcast seat. He covers the NASCAR races over the weekend for NBC. So that has been a further extension of his engagement with the sport. I also want to mention Max Siegel and Jennifer Siegel. They are based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. They are an African-American couple who own the team Rev Racing that fields our NASCAR Drive for Diversity drivers. So we have team ownership involvement across many different levels of the sport. Love that Michael Jordan is on board, and hopefully that opens up the eyes of others to see this as a potential ownership opportunity as well. But yes, we have Michael, we have Brad, we have the Siegels, and welcome more.
I want to just take a moment and sort of step into a little bit around the Confederate flag, and also just the long history and passion of African American fans who love racing. And certainly there are, NASCAR is one type of racing,
Right.
but the sport of racing is really deep and wide. And,
Yes.
both my parents, Dawn, are from North Carolina, and my dad was always a huge race car fan. I mean, it was on the track from the Brickyard to NASCAR. To really understanding, through my father, I got to understand sort of the deep, deep history of African Americans in the sport, sort of these smaller hometown leagues and racing venues that were really well established,
Yes.
little known outside of the Black community. But there's always been a very strong Southern Black history in racing, and yet there wasn't the red carpet. There wasn't a welcoming into the more white-centered part of the sport. And that's just a reality. And,
Yes.
we see that this is something that we have seen in hockey. And yet NASCAR has had a fascinating, history in terms of its discrimination. And there's been a long road towards breaking those barriers that you've been involved with. And here earlier this summer, we saw one of the final vestiges of the white-centered NASCAR really sort of retire itself. And yet I know that was a long road in coming.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And one of my, I guess, points of view that sustains me in the work that I do is we can't recreate the past, but we definitely can shape the future. I think the statement and the policy of removing the Confederate flag is probably in my top 5 days of just feeling great about the work that I've done personally and the work that many others collectively have done to really make the sport accountable. If we are pushing to have our sport be diverse and inclusive and welcoming, then we need to make sure that all elements, from the moment you go online, the moment you step your foot on the track, that it is reflective of that, that it is welcoming, that it is diverse, and it is inclusive. And as you say, the Confederate flag symbol does not reflect that. So just having the collective input and force of not just employees, but more importantly, our drivers, specifically Bubba Wallace, just speak up to say, no, this flag does not reflect NASCAR as I know it to be welcoming, to be inclusive. So yes, it was a very important pivot to really vocally, emphatically from the president of NASCAR, Steve Phelps, state that this flag will no longer be able to be displayed, worn, or seen on any NASCAR track property. I do think also, as you mentioned, there is a rich, very rich, long storied history of African Americans in the sport, which we're really working to better document and tell the stories of. Wendell Scott, in particular, who was the first African American to win a national series for NASCAR, the only African American currently to be inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, is an example of that. His family has established the Wendell Scott Foundation. They do a lot of outreach on their own. And we also support just maintaining his legacy by events and programs such as a UNCF, United Negro College Fund, Wendell Scott Scholarship. We also award annually an award to a diverse or female driver at what we call our home track series, our lower level series. Wendell Scott, of course, is a legacy driver and one that we hope others will emulate. But in addition to Mr. Scott, there are just tons of other stories of individuals that are currently unknown. That's one of the things that myself and others have really taken a mantle to make sure we document who these individuals are and what their role has been in the sport, because there are many more as well.
There's a great Netflix piece on Willie T. Ribbs that chronicles his racing life. There was a piece of his racing career that involved NASCAR, but for the most part, he was doing other type of racing, including Indy.
Correct.
And but it is a really fascinating piece to see sort of the history, giving a little bit of a history when you look at a Black male racer, in the sport.
Yep, absolutely. And I think Willie T. Ribbs has a very dynamic personality. I've had the opportunity to meet him. I think he is very critical and very important role in both IndyCar, NASCAR, and has really also, kept us honest in terms of, if you say you're going to do something, then make sure you do it.
Yeah, one of the things that fascinates me about NASCAR is really the reality that both men and women can go head to head in competition.
Yes.
And, I think it's probably one of the only sports. Every other sport is segregated by gender. We have the NBA, we have the WNBA,
right.
From, golf, hockey, you name it, soccer. But in NASCAR, here we see both men and women are able to get on the field. And that is just so exciting for me. Of course, Danica Patrick being one of the most well-known female drivers that we can, call out her name.
Yes, and I think referencing back to the NASCAR Drive for Diversity program, we typically have about half of the class are young girls, ranging from the ages of 13, 14 to their early 20s. And I will tell you, Margaret, they are as fierce, if not more fierce, when they get in the car. I think they know kind of they have a bit of a target on their back, if you will, as a girl, and they welcome that. And they are as tough and as aggressive as any driver who wants to win. I think that it's also great within our program, as well as a few others in the industry. There is a camaraderie with the young female drivers, and they support each other. They connect with each other. I have 3 daughters. I have 4 kids, 3 daughters, and I want my daughters to be as competitive as my son. And just really encourage that. As I mentioned earlier, one of our other focuses is really educating parents, you know, because if you're not around racing, a parent may just not really embrace the thought of their child getting in a vehicle and going, you know, upwards of 150 miles an hour in the starter cars, let alone the Cup Series, which is close to 200 miles per hour. So it has to be all hands on deck. You know, the family has to really support their child's vision or dream or encourage it. And, you know, someone has to physically take you to a track. It's not as if, as we call stick and ball sports, that you just go outside or go to the park or go in your backyard. You have to actually go somewhere to physically get in the car and race. So we're very encouraging of just education of the parents and the community and the child about what those opportunities are and what it takes to move up the ranks. If I could also briefly mention, because it is a sport that doesn't have as easy of an access, if you will, we have also invested and partnered with a lot of esports platforms. So we do have a few different platforms, in particular Iracing, which is a way to introduce kids to racing without necessarily having to invest in a car and travel to a track. In fact, our Cup Series drivers, which are our top drivers, practice on iRacing because it does simulate the different banking and other elements of each track. So that is something that we encourage people whose child has perhaps expressed an interest in racing to invest in. It's a steering wheel, a license, and some foot pedals. And, you know, just check it out. And if it's something that they embrace, you know, who knows, maybe they'll advance to being on the track one day.
You know, I do tend to think of NASCAR and race car driving as a legacy sport. This is the sport that I tend to think of where you see families and generations involved and children sort of come up in this legacy sort of way, learning to drive, being around the car and the pit crew, et cetera, et cetera. And it is an enormous cost.
Yes.
You know, you are really looking comparable to team sports, professional team sports, and yet it really is this sort of single, a smaller driving team and car, or I know there are multiple cars on each of the team, but it is a very, very, very expensive sport, even at the entrance.
Yes.
But the bar to get in is just so very high. So this iRacing is, or the e-racing platform is really sort of this entry point to be able to invite young people, boys and girls, and young people of all backgrounds into the sport.
Yes.
And sort of circumvent, if you will, a little bit of the family history. But that's not, that family history and mentorship in my mind must still be incredibly important to the ultimate success. I know just even looking at Bubba Wallace and the relationship that he has had with Richard Petty. Of course, he drove for Richard Petty and Petty's team, Richard Petty being just, you know, a Hall of Famer.
He's the king,
driver.
as we say.
What?
he's the king.
The king, right, right, exactly. I am a big sports fan, and so it's been fun to be, the last couple of weeks talking with my team about, NASCAR and trying to sort of frame up who Richard Petty is for everybody. But yeah, he's just, top of the Hall of Fame list, and that is huge. You still need that support. So how do you with that focus on the track, sort of build that type of access and relationship? It's so key.
Yep. We approach it on several different fronts. I think a lot of it is education and exposure. So we tackle it many different ways. I'll kind of go through a range of some of the initiatives. For example, introducing the concepts that are within NASCAR in a classroom setting. So obviously with the whole STEM platform, science, technology, engineering, math, NASCAR has a platform called Acceleration Nation, which is more classroom curriculum centered. It's actually run out of our marketing department, not our department, but we work in very close alignment with that group. So part of it is introducing NASCAR in, I guess, traditional places where kids are already consuming information, and then introducing kind of that NASCAR perspective. So during classroom engagement, on social media, websites, we do a lot of youth groups. Obviously this year, things have been a little bit sideways with that. But as an example, our department partnered with a graduate school program down in Florida, University of Central Florida, the business school program, to execute an initiative with the local Girl Scout troops. So most of the Girl Scouts have never, known much about NASCAR, have never been to a race. We were able to overlay several different elements, including a fitness component. So we had our pit crew members do a few different exercises, which we would encourage the girls to do during the race breaks. We talked about healthy snacks. We talked about how to build a car. So just really kind of fun activities that hopefully will stick with them. So as they get older and become more aware of different activities or programs, that they can really engage with something like that. We are hoping that we can get some more of our industry partners, maybe one of the auto manufacturers, or, maybe Coca-Cola, who may be interested in nutrition. So really just taking several different areas of what we're already doing and putting it together in a cohesive way. Going back to one of our initiatives, as I mentioned, the Opinion Leader Initiative, is physically hosting and bringing people out. I think for many people, until they actually come and see, they don't see the scope and the magnitude. And to your point, it is a very expensive sport. But there are ways, at least at the entry level, as I mentioned with the Iracing, and with Drive for Diversity, we essentially offer each driver what you could equate to a six-figure scholarship. So each of the drivers that are admitted to our program relocate to North Carolina, and all of their expenses are covered in terms of the car, the staff who work on the car, the travel to the races. So it's a way for them to, even though they don't have that legacy relationship, as you mentioned, just bringing them in and helping them out with some base level resources so they can at least test their skills, see if they have what it takes. And we help to get them recognized within the industry. Bubba Wallace is a graduate of that program, as is another driver, Daniel Suarez, who actually won one of our National Series titles a few years ago. So we have seen success. We have, as I mentioned, are starting to even start earlier. I think our youngest youth driver this past season was maybe 10 or 11. So really getting them in the queue sooner, and hoping as they develop that there will be some sponsors and others who take interest in supporting them.
It's great. I want to pivot sort of to organizational culture.
Mhm.
And I can imagine that over a 13-year period with NASCAR, you have seen maybe three, maybe more distinct shifts in the culture. Where you are today is certainly not where you were when you entered into the organization 13 years ago. But can you talk about different iterations that you have experienced and how the NASCAR organization itself has begun to shift? Certainly, several years ago, I just began noticing a more external friendliness and welcomingness around women and people of color, women of color,
Mhm.
just even in the fan base, saying, "Hey, come on in."
Yeah.
And I know that that required an emotional shift internally. So if you
Mhm.
could talk about it, and I say it all the time, even with the YWCA, over my 10 years here, it's been like three different organizations
Yeah.
as we continue to grow and develop our strength and our muscle. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Sure, sure. I think I would point to two things. I think the biggest thing has been our area, diversity and inclusion, has to be and has started to be more at the forefront of conversations in terms of strategy, in terms of marketing, in terms of communication. It can't be an add-on at the end. So I have seen the evolution of just more recognition of this area. It's strategic. It's not a flavor of the month. So I think, being involved in the discussions on the front end with sponsors, with partners, like how can we make sure there's a D&I element in our execution? How can we make sure in our hiring, in our training, in our development, in our marketing material, that D&I is part of the fabric from the initial concept, not, fourth ring.
When did you
I
go
say
from
that.
when did you go from having to push in to being invited in?
I think it's a little difficult to answer because I think it depends on the area of the company. So I would say, for example, competition has always been an area that we've been able to be at the front end in terms of the Drive for Diversity programming. On the hiring front, I think we've been able to be at the front end in terms of internships and entry level and getting people in the pipeline. I think we have some continued work to do in terms of elevation and just mentoring and succession planning, and are working with our HR department on that front. On the marketing side, I think we're getting there. Traditionally, that area has been a lot more siloed. Not anyone's fault, just the structure of our company. And I think just really being involved again at the front end of, well, who are we trying to reach? What should the marketing concept be? What are those images that will resonate? I think I probably feel more comfortable in that space because I do have a marketing background and worked in consumer packaged goods. So for better or worse, I do have an opinion that I share in that regard. So I think it just really depends on what area of the company. Another one that I think we have gotten much better with is our sponsors. We have official partners where traditionally, again, the structure of the company wasn't necessarily, well, let's see who else we can involve in these conversations. I think that has almost gone 180 in terms of our involvement and discussion with our partners about how programs and initiatives are reflective of our values, our goals, and how, excuse me, how diversity and inclusion can get involved. Another piece I will point to is we have, since I've been there, have had at least every other year live training for all employees. The name of it has changed over time, from, sensitivity training, diversity training, anti-racism training, but it's a mandate. We have a mandate that all employees participate in this training and really help provide our employees with the tools to empower themselves to also be advocates. I think that has been a huge transition, that it's not just the D&I department's responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility. So that is a piece that has been built upon over the years. One of the other things that I don't think we talked about earlier, but starting next week, we are launching employee resource groups. Some people may refer to them as affinity groups. We are starting with an African-American Black group, Hispanic Latinx, and women, with the goal to add more groups in 2021. That no doubt has been an evolution, just in terms of really understanding that employees do have a voice and do have value to helping shape our strategy, our programs, and development. So that is an area where a few years ago, probably not on the docket. This year, people are already asking us, well, when are you adding more? So that's definitely one that I can point to that I've seen maybe enforced. You mentioned thirds, maybe forced, where we're landing at a place where from the leadership down, from our president down, there is an acknowledgement that these types of programs are important. And I don't like the word programs, but engagement is important, and that all employees should have a voice in this space.
What you point to is just the strong importance of having a robust internal platform that the work you do internally really will showcase the work that happens externally.
Right.
If you're not doing the work internally, there's no way for you really to have an authentic external voice,
right,
to sustain it, to be able to grow it. There's your core isn't
right.
Strong enough to be able to sustain it. So for me, being able to see Michael Jordan come in, I know that the infrastructure is really tight.
Yes. Yes.
So it's so amazing. When several weeks ago, Bubba Wallace did a beautiful exit in terms of, leaving the Petty team and honoring Richard Petty and that team and everything. And I just thought, well, what is happening now? What is this? Is this a good thing? What's going on here? And of course, this week it all got revealed.
And the unveil.
The unveil, yeah, which is really, really exciting. But it is, it's emotionally. This is you 13 years ago. This was Mount Everest. you were given the task of climbing Mount Everest without any oxygen. I mean, it's just an enormous job to think about. Not only the historical implications of NASCAR being white. It has very deep Southern roots. So NASCAR from Virginia to Charlotte to Daytona, over to Fort Worth, Texas, and all in between, but strong Southern roots, which all of those connotations certainly get captured in the Confederate flag, but there is this real and not imagined barrier, wall, reality of this ironclad system of NASCAR that you step into 13 years ago, saying, okay, I'm gonna move this.
Yeah.
what was your, sort of, how did you start building, building relationship and then managing change and really creating the internal trust?
Yeah.
Because I think in my mind, what you had to do early on was simply build relationship to be able
Yeah.
to navigate and maneuver. And I imagine that that almost even took a couple of years.
Yeah, I think, as you say, relationships are key, are critical. And really, Margaret, meeting people where they are, and really becoming an active listener and acknowledging the spaces that I have gaps, and also acknowledging, you know, where I may have expertise, other people may have gaps, and also not taking things personal. I think, oh, and that may be just, you know, an age thing as you mature and grow. But there are people in the company who over time have, I won't necessarily say confided in me, but had conversations with me about perceptions of race, racism, African Americans, Hispanics, others, where 10 years ago, absolutely would never even engage in those conversations, but it's a journey. I think everyone is learning. And I think the more that people can be exposed to different cultures, different parts of the country and the world, candidly, it really opens you up to understand at the end of the day, we're all humans. We care about, you know, our families, you know, we want to live in safe communities. We want to go somewhere and be entertained and be comfortable. I mean, everyone wants that. So really, I've approached my role in that way, and really try to hold that bar and make other people accountable for that same level of commitment to making sure at the end of the day, if we're here as an employee at NASCAR and we say we want this sport to be welcoming, diverse, and inclusive, these are the things that we have to do to ensure that happens. I think there has been a lot of endorsement and support from our leadership, which definitely helps in that regard. And really also just strong partners across the sports landscape. More recently, you'll see there's a lot of renewed interest within D&I in the sports landscape. But it's collectively something that many leagues are working on, and taking best practices and making sure that we're all learning and growing. NASCAR, for an example, is part of a group that's called DISC. It's the Diversity and Inclusion Sports Consortium, where pretty much every major league is a member of, as well as other groups such as NCAA, USOC, United States Olympic Committee, excuse me. We hold an annual symposium. We did not hold one this year due to the pandemic, but we hold one annually where we all get together, talk about best practices, successes, challenges, frustrations, failures, all of that. NASCAR hosted it about a year ago in Daytona. We had about 175 sports practitioners and others across the sports landscape convene. And it also renews you, you know, it gives you more energy to know, even though at times you may feel like you're alone climbing that hill, that there are other like-minded people who are in the journey with you, who can empathize and help you grow. So that's been my approach, to realize that I'm not in it alone. There are other people who are kind of rowing in the same boat, and hopefully we can continue to get a bigger boat and get more people.
Years ago, I lived in Dallas, Texas, right outside of Dallas, and we would often go to Houston to go to the ballet because they had an African-American prima ballerina, Lauren Anderson. And the Houston Ballet did Sleeping Beauty. And I can remember standing in the store, the theater, lobby during the intermission, and all of the swag was this, dark-skinned African-American ballerina, Sleeping Beauty, motif.
Yeah.
And I was in the store literally crying. And my daughter was like, Mom, do you have to cry? And I felt that when I saw all of the drivers behind Wallace. I had that same feeling
Yes.
of humanity and being able to sort of finally get through this barrier. But I want to, I say all that to ask, how specifically do you see anti-racism sort of being folded into your D&I work, and what will that look like going forward? We've reached a new bar. There is still a strong appetite to be able to learn and grow and dismantle our own thinking about bias and race, right? We are very clear about racism's role in the history of America. How will you incorporate anti-racist approaches and work ongoing into what you currently do?
Yeah. I think part of it is education. That's how the 21-day challenge came to me from my friend, but really making sure that we have those kinds of resources, which for those listening, if you haven't done it, I would encourage you to do it. Even if you think you know everything about a certain topic, you don't. There's always more to learn. I think I don't want to overstate training in education, but I do think that's critical as a foundation for us to move from where we are. NASCAR has partnered primarily with two organizations over the years. One is Institute of Sport and Social Justice, which is led by Dr. Richard Lapchek, and they do a lot of training within the sports space. And we've more recently partnered with an organization called RISE, which is also focused on sports equity and inclusion, and have also embarked on some training programs with that organization. For the first time ever since, I believe, NASCAR's inception, certainly since I've been there, we will be rolling out training to all of our national series drivers, something we have never done. Post George Floyd, many of our drivers, who are primarily white males, spoke up and said, there's a lot I don't know. There's a lot I need to learn. I want to listen. I want to learn how to be an ally, an advocate, whatever, terminology people are comfortable with. And so we've listened to that request and are in the process of providing curriculum to them as a proactive component, not a training after something has gone awry. So we will be rolling out that training for the drivers. We will also be reinstituting, hopefully in 2021, live training with our employees. If not, we'll go virtual. But I think just really trying to level set people to understand, this is the vision, this is where we are, there's a gap. Let's be clear that we're not where we want to be, and let's make sure that we can lay out the steps that will get us where we aim to be. The other kind of big pivot for NASCAR, I will say at the end of 2019, is NASCAR acquired another company, International Speedway Corporation. So because of that acquisition, NASCAR owns now about 15 or 16 tracks all across the country, so all the way from California to the East Coast. So really making sure that our culture, excuse me, from the offices as well as at the tracks is consistent, and that when people, come to the gate at a track in California, they're going to have as a positive experience as a gate in Charlotte, although we don't own that track. So really just making sure that there are resources for people to learn, and also empowering our management team to make sure that they can, one, identify where there are those gaps and how we can make sure that we're again holding true to our mission and our vision of a company. Because of the somewhat complicated structure of NASCAR, it's also important to have the teams on board, the drivers, our official sponsors, obviously the league. So it's not a one-man show, like everyone, the infamous same page, is what we're trying to get everybody on. And will it be seamless? No. But just really trying to make sure that we're continually looking at that North Star and making sure that we're honest with ourselves. There candidly are some gaps that need to be addressed, but we can't address those if we don't acknowledge them and if we don't have the resources to address those gaps. So that's where we are right now in terms of that process of anti-racism, and also comfortable using the words, using the terminology, and acknowledging there are issues in our country that are based on racism and sexism and many other isms. So let's be honest about that and start from where we are.
So you lead diversity and inclusion at NASCAR. Are you embedded within the HR team? Are you embedded within the marketing team? How exactly does that configuration look? Because I hear you having both influence and sort of direction with those two other teams.
Mm-hmm. Our department reports up through our CMO, our Chief Marketing Officer. So we report straight up into the marketing function. We do work very closely with our HR department and as well as our competition department. But structurally, organizationally, we report up to marketing.
As you were talking, I was thinking about, like, how did you get here, but what was it in terms of this interest? We have, walking through your career, really strong marketing. You mentioned, being involved in international brands on the packaging side of marketing. And so how do you sort of slide into diversity and inclusion, and sort of where did that come from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A combination of things, and I will say it's funny to me because students now have a very specific major. It's like you can major in diversity and inclusion for sports or what have you. Those majors didn't exist when I was in school. So it's just some of the students, when they ask, well, what was your specialty in D&I in school? It's like, well, we didn't have that. But as you say, my background is primarily in marketing. But I also worked within the food service industry for two trade associations. One was focused on multiculturalism within the hospitality food service business. Again, ensuring equity for job opportunities, supplier diversity, and marketing. I also worked for a group called the Women's Food Service Forum within food service, focusing on leadership, equity, development for women within food service. So I think those two jobs, in addition to my experience at the YWCA, really, that was always part of what I did, and what I wanted to do was really something that focused on diversity and inclusion. I did not have a sports background at all, in particular, not NASCAR. I tell people very candidly, when I was considering the role, I read NASCAR for Dummies, no shame, because I didn't know the sport. I grew up here in Cleveland, had never been to a track. So I really ramped up my knowledge and asked a lot of questions. When I started working at NASCAR, I started, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before the Daytona 500 that year, which is our Super Bowl.
Mhm.
And for the Daytona 500, I had to give people a tour and explain things to them. So my books came into hand in hand because they said, "Oh, you really know a lot about NASCAR." It's like, well, about 3 weeks worth. So a lot of it was learning as I went, in terms of understanding the sport. But I think, the D&I and the marketing knowledge and expertise are very transferable. It's just really understanding the nuances of whatever industry or business you're working in and how you can actually overlay or implement those particular practices or initiatives. So a lot of steep climbing up that hill, in particular the first, I'd say 6 to 9 months, and then the mist lifted, so to speak. I still don't have all the answers, of course, but it became a lot clearer to me in terms of what things could be done from a league perspective, in terms of me being an employee at the league, as well as how to strategically engage with others within the industry, again, being the teams, the tracks, the drivers, our official partners. And it's an ongoing challenge to make sure we're all doing the same dance seamlessly. But if we all know what the goal is, we have much better success than if we're all looking at, four different dance books, so to speak. But it definitely was not, I probably, in hindsight, I didn't know how much I didn't know. So that might've been a good thing, because I never really felt like overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I can't do this. It was always like, what else can I learn to do what I'm doing more effectively? And I've had some great allies and supporters along the way. People have, kind of pointed me in the right direction or connected me with others in the sport, served as, someone I could blow off steam with or get advice from. So again, going back to those relationships, really important, to make sure you establish those, maintain those, nurture those. Actually, on my way here from Florida, a former coworker, who's now an attorney at NASA, called me just to check in and see how things were going. So those relationships are important, and I think I've done that in my personal life as well as my professional life as long as I can remember, and that has helped stabilize me and keep me grounded over the years.
Well, we have come to the end of our hour, and I can't thank you enough. I am just so excited for you and the work that you are doing and the movement that is happening at NASCAR. I think it is really a incredible model to both see and understand the long, solid, steady history, and the ability over the last 15 years, 13 years, certainly since you've been there, around disrupting, building relationship, growing, pushing, encouraging, and creating real change, both on the track and in the pits and in the office. All of those things are just absolutely critical. And I look forward over the next several years just seeing the expansive growth for women and people of color. This has been a game-changing week. We are so thrilled you've been able to join us. And I thank you.
Thank you.
Are doing incredible work. So proud of you. Love your YWCA roots. And we will be cheering you on. And just really, really just amazing game-changing, forward-thinking and modeling what is possible, that change, real change, concrete change and growth is possible. So
Well,
thank you, Dawn. We will be in touch. Have a wonderful weekend. And I want to say thank you to everybody who joined us today. I want to thank our sponsor, Verizon, for making this possible. This has been an amazing discussion and conversation with Dawn Harris. Next week, we have Justin Bibb, who is going to join us. And of course, join us for Robin DiAngelo, October 9th, the author of White Fragility. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.